It's real. It's real. You know the deal. You know the deal. Come on.
Hey, it's Shanté.
And I'm Natalie. And welcome to What's the Deal, a podcast powered by The Norfus Firm. At The Norfus Firm, we solve people problems. We have the great pleasure of working with employers all around the world on human resources and diversity, equity, and inclusion issues. It's the end of the year.
Wow. The year went fast and slow, kind of, but mostly fast.
Yeah.
Because I don't know how it's even December. Well,
Ish.
Yep.
No, Friday, 2 days.
Wow.
Yeah.
Already. But then also, it was just, I don't know, there was just a lot of up and down this year. A lot of heavy stuff. But glad we made it. I saw something on social recently that someone was like, I can't remember the exact quote around it, but it was basically like, I just survived 2023. Like I didn't, there was no thriving, there was no nothing, just made it. So happy to be here.
Well, and I think that we more than survived. We had a lot of thriving moments. Mm-hmm. And I think that's probably what made some of the heavy stuff so noticeable. Because there were a lot of really high, and like really dip. And I think like to start on the highs, I mean, I loved our summer recap travel episode because the traveling this year was mind-blowing, you know? I mean, and it really contributed, I think, to my growth as a human. And being in certain situations that we talk about hypothetically, like actually going places that, you know, you're not from, you're not familiar with. And then I think this year definitely highlighted that growth comes from discomfort, right? You're not going to grow without it.
You can't grow otherwise. And I think maybe that's the point that people are speaking to about the year. As challenging as it may have been for folks, it's that opportunity to grow. And that can't come just from staying stagnant or complacent or whatever. You have to change. And change is difficult. It's hard. But when you get on the other side of it, gosh, it's a beautiful thing. It's really, really necessary. So happy to be on this side of change, the year, all the things, and just, you know, talking about our growth and how we've been able to, I don't know, make it through.
Yeah. So, you know, when we were thinking about this episode, we love a good recap. You know, we recap at the end of episodes.
We recap at the end of everything.
We recap at the end of the meetings.
Meetings.
Wait, so okay, you're doing this, I'm doing this.
Hey, we on the same page here? Always.
Yeah. Well, you know, one of my things this year is that clarity is a gift.
Yeah.
And so even when you're getting discomfortable clarity, uncomfortable, that's not even a word. Uncomfortable clarity. I mean, you know how it goes. But this idea of a lot of clarity this year. Mm-hmm. Some of it was hard. Some of it's great. But then you come back and it's like we talk all the time about once you've grown or once you've seen something new, you can't unsee it. So you're going to keep pushing higher. So I do think that we've seen a lot of that this year. And thinking about this recap, it was like, wow, like, well, why do we keep doing this?
Yeah.
Why do we keep showing up?
Well, there's just a general passion for it that we have, right? Like we
show me with your energy.
This work. Ooh, I don't know if I can do it right now. It's December, babe. I done went through a whole year. I'm tired.
I did that very kindergarten. Show me. Like, charade it. What's the word mean?
But okay, so right. But we're here, right? We made it. I think we really love doing this work, and it can, to the point of honoring just what it is. It's hard work. But we love people, and we love working with people, and we love seeing when we do have those breakthroughs. I mean, we see it in our work when a project that we're working on or a client that we're working with is able to get a breakthrough. Yeah. Gosh, that is so exciting. And it's really, and to see the shift that occurs in organizations when they are able to apply something that we've been working with them on is fantastic. And so same thing with us in our work and what we do here, but like with this podcast, when we get the feedback or we see that things hit or people respond to us and it's like, okay, we're not just out here talking into whatever, a black hole. Like this is connecting with people. So I think that we keep coming back for that. That's that adrenaline hit that you get in that work, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so if you were going to say, you think about when I was looking at the podcast list, our first one was actually your jam, which is how mindfulness is connected to DEI. So if you think about that being the first episode that we released this year, and the last episode we've released as of today was the psychological safety with Ben Delk, which I said earlier, like how fortuitous is that? Like we start with mindfulness, we end with mindfulness. We're not end for the year, but meaning most recently. What would you say is your personal why for this work different? Is it evolved? Is it shifted? Like what would you say if you're using those two as your anchor points?
So if I'm looking at mindfulness at the beginning, and then how does that relate to, because it's like yourself, right? And then how does that connect to
mindfulness at the beginning?
Yeah.
That's a whole different, oh my gosh.
The mindfulness at the beginning compared to the mindfulness now has definitely shifted, and it's a journey, and it's constant, right? Like this doesn't end. And so it's those levels of awareness that you get as you go deeper and deeper into this work. And it feels like you're unlocking levels, like if you're playing a video game and you're unlocking levels. And I think that's the point of it for me. It's seeing that growth in that year from where I started, from where others have started, and then seeing how this shows up now and how we can apply it to others. I think that's the thing that really gets me is I can apply it better now after going through this year with it, right?
Yes. And I would say that, like, as a duo, as a team, where we've definitely evolved in this year, when I think about you're saying, like, what we were saying mindfulness was in January and like, what we think it is now, is this idea of non-attachment. Y'all, like, we really get committed to what we do in ways where it's like we feel like we're part of our clients' organizations, and like, and it's like, I think knowing that as long as we're imparting great information, like we can't guarantee a particular outcome. It doesn't have to look a certain way. And I think that becoming less attached to like the outcome and more attached to the process and ensuring that we're being disciplined, we're listening.
Yeah.
Those are the things that I feel like, at least for me, and again, not just you and I, but the whole team, it's like we've brought
Definitely
ourselves
elevated to that point. I gotta, give you your flowers for that too, because you've experienced a lot of growth this year, just in terms of your own attachment to outcomes and wanting things to be a certain way, and very, you've let go of a lot of your conditioning, which is what we ask people to do all the time. Is like, look at the bias, the conditioning, and all the things, and it has served you at some point. It got you to this point, but maybe it's not in service going forward. And so how do you let some of those things go? So I really appreciate watching you through that process of applying the mindfulness, seeing how, this actually causes me suffering, gives me problems, gives me pain, trying to force somebody to do something because I'm attached that it needs to look a certain way, and releasing that and just being like, I did my part. Hey man, whatever you do with it is what you do with it.
It's like a dove. It's like releasing a dove, honestly, where you're like, if you keep a dove in a cage, there's like only so much it can do. But when you watch the dove, like you can instantly see. And I think for my own growth of really wanting what's best for my clients and really wanting like the change and wanting people to show up at work and being able to see themselves. And when you get into that mode, you're watching situations and you're just like, oh, if you just did that. And I think that piece around releasing comes from, but it's not for me to decide if you get that piece. It's not for me to decide if you recognize, hey, if you just make these 3 adjustments, or you have this one, I know it's a really tough, uncomfortable conversation, but if you just have that conversation, it's going to open a whole world. People have to see that for themselves. And that is probably the most frustrating part about systems change and change management, is that change does not usually happen in the big fell swoops we hope it can. It's incremental, and how you get comfortable with those increments.
Right. And it's being able to see, it's the mirror effect, right? Like you being able to be in these spaces and observe these things in other people is also something that you can observe within yourself, which again comes back to the mindfulness part of it, right? It's like, okay, you can see that if this person just made these 3 changes, that it would completely shift everything. They would get exactly what they want to get, but they're not ready for it. And it's like, okay, so I wonder where that is in my own life. Like if I could make 3 changes, 1 change, whatever it is, what would unlock for me, right? And it's being able to do that. I think the part of the growth there for both of us is just that part, that reflection, like, okay, it's one thing to just constantly be externally focused, but you got to really do a lot of the internal work too.
Yes. And I think that the thing that we can guarantee is that everything that we're suggesting to you, we're doing. And I think that this was a year of practicing what we preach.
Very much so.
For sure, because we've built a larger team than we had a year ago. We've expanded in some of the type of work we've done. And so it's meant, okay, we have to be more disciplined about certain processes and procedures. I can tell you, we've always been disciplined about our data gathering, but being open to other people's views on how we do the work. Like when we started, it was just me and you.
Yeah.
Like it was funny. The other night we were doing work and I was in the dark and I'm like, this is how we started. It's late and I'm on the computer with a little bit of light on me and and then now we have lights in the office and all kind of other stuff.
We have a production staff and all sorts of
But the point being is that when you want something different, you're going to do something different. And I think that's, again, the biggest takeaway is the work on yourself never ends. The work on these companies never end. Like it's a continuum. And when you accept the continuum, then you can make,
that's a big one.
I was going to say, what happened?
No,
what
that's
happened?
big
Tell me.
because it doesn't end. And I think one of the themes this year in particular, because there has been a shift in like the external factors in terms of the work that we do, especially the work that we do on the DEI side, where everyone's like, well, why aren't we there yet? Why haven't we achieved this thing? But it's to the point that you just made where it doesn't, there is no end to it. There's always opportunities to grow. There's always opportunities to do something different, to expand, to just make it better in some way, shape, or form. And so you have to constantly be wanting to be in that work. Is it exhausting? Yes. Are you going to want to, like, some days you're not going to want to show up for it in the same way that you showed up for it yesterday? Totally fine. Do the best that you can with whatever resources you have, but you still got to show up for it in order to progress and grow. And to sound cliche, I mean, the destination that's not it. It's the journey. It's the learning that comes with going through this process. And I would say more so the learning about yourself.
Yeah. I think if I had like one big hope and wish and dream for all of us is that focusing on the self-awareness and focusing on how you show up, because there's a lot of harm going on right now, and a lot of the harm we see because people just show up and they're not willing to stop. And for those who listen regularly, you hear us talk about this a lot and from a lot of different angles, because it's like when we are watching these situations go down, it's like you see the suffering and you're like, oh, but it doesn't have to be like that. But the only way for it to not be like that is if you see yourself in it. So I think, in thinking about this year and the themes, I would say for sure, mindfulness in its many forms has been huge. So the self-awareness piece, holding space for others,
the empathy, the emotional intelligence,
creating trust, right? It keeps coming back to those human relational issues. So this idea of we need to be more productive. Well, it's productive to have strong people relationships. And we gotta focus more effort on that piece, because as I said on another episode that we taped recently, like as of today, and at least for the next foreseeable future, like you need human beings to do the work. And it's like, you have to do the human work to get, what you gotta, what you want. What's that song? You know what I'm talking about? Sorry, that was a little bit of a side note.
I feel like I know which song it is, but I can't.
Yeah,
in my head right now.
Santi knows. He shook his head. Yes. So,
but you can't always get what you want, I think is the lyric, right? Okay. Santi's like, yeah, that's it.
You can't always get what you want if you don't do anything to get the thing. But so yeah, I think if it like the show up, like we keep showing up because it's magical. It is magical when you keep putting the foot in front of the other and you're like, like to me, some of the funnest things funnest is a word. I make up words, so I don't know. Is that a word? Is funnest, most fun? Funnest. It's fine.
I don't know. It's going to be a word today.
It's a lot of fun, guys. The things that was a lot of fun, we helped a client through a really tough conversation on like performance standards, and we got to see 4 people get promoted to like really big roles that they were waiting at one client. At another client, our client contact went from being a client contact to heading up DEI. Man. And it's like, holy crap, that's so cool. Like we're here seeing these shifts to see people use different language when we talk to them and see themselves a little bit more has been really cool this year.
It's been, the unlock has been really, really cool, right? Like seeing things just from the work that we do, conversations that we have, people are like, oh, and you see the light bulb moment go off, right? You see it happen in their head, and then they take action on it. Because that's the thing. It's like you can have this awareness, but what are you going to do about it? And then when people do something about it, then they get the results that they want to get, and it's beautiful. Man, it makes it worth it. It
does, because I think, you know, not to turn this into some level of toxic positivity, like, you know, everything's rainbows and unicorns. It's not. And we stick to it because we know it works.
Because if we're honest, the majority of it is
rough,
terrible. It's really bad.
It's like, rough, guys.
People struggle with it, and it's normal. I feel like to acknowledge the fact that people have a hard time with the people stuff. They struggle with it. So when you get those little wins, it's like, okay, hold on to that.
Because it's sort of. I think I said this in a conversation yesterday where we really work to get to know our clients so we can think about as many of the variables as possible, right? And thinking about what you want to achieve and thinking about who you are as a company and your values. We're not going to come in and recommend something that's completely outside of who you are. Because again, as I love to say, we're talking about subtle but significant shifts. Mm-hmm. I'm not coming in and say, be a whole new company, be a whole new person. Right. Like we're not saying that. So we really care for you and we're thinking about you. And when you keep challenging, but what, it's like you also have to just do it, right? So the other thing that I think we've been really clear about this year is that there is no like, this is going to be a little messy, but you have to actually start and you actually have to try and you actually have to let it percolate a little and not just a week or a month, but like 6 months at least to see like, is this working? Is it not? And it's like that piece of resistance has been difficult for me this year, right? Mm-hmm. Where it's like, people are like, we want to change. We want to be so different. We want to be whatever, employer of choice, all these things. And it's like, even when we try to meet people where they are, they take themselves lower sometimes. And
they dig in. They're like, they double down.
Damn it.
Like, nope,
I thought I figured out where you are. And it's like, I just encourage people as we continue forward is like, do you really want to change? Like, don't just say it because you get, not forget about us. I mean, like, yes, we matter and we're going to resource ourselves, but I can't tell you how many times this year I've seen folks that we like who are either subject matter experts or they're called in to help with projects on the client side. And you can tell they're so excited about the content. And then the leaders just, and you're like, you watch the deflation in people. And that part is like really hard. Of course, our own disappointment is important. I'm not discounting that. But we watch that over and over with people where you're like, oh, I thought this time they really meant it. Right. I thought they really were going to do it. And I just think, like I say, be real. Like, if you don't want to change, you don't have to. Like, there's no one saying you have to. And just be open with your employees so that they have a choice in the matter. But when you string them along and make it seem like you're going to, and then you just stop, it's like, that's not nice, guys. That's mean.
It's icky.
It's icky. We're going to use kindergarten words here because that's what it is. So anyway, I think just in the recap of our recap, part one, because we're going to come back with part two and tell you some of our favorite moments from our podcast. It's mindfulness is here to stay. I mean, I'm not even saying, you look at every trend on social media, it's back to people are not okay with you treating them any kind of way. I think it's only going to get more powerful. I've been reading articles about this of like, people are so empowered and emboldened right now. So be mindful. And mindfulness is multiple different things. Understanding that change comes with discomfort, right? One foot in front of the other. Consistency is, I think, the third thing we're saying here, which comes back to the change takes time. Exactly. And I think we wrap it up by saying there is no end to any of this. So when you can accept and frame your mind that we just keep going, it can make some of this sort of practice and ability to give each other's grace.
Yeah.
So we thank those who are listening. We love your feedback. We also say, if you love us, put a review on all of the players that you listen to it on. We really would appreciate it. We would also appreciate you telling all your friends how much you love the podcast, please. We're on YouTube. We're on Spotify. We're on Apple. We're on Instagram. We're on TikTok. We're on a lot of places that you can find us. And we'd really love it if you shared with folks. And we'd love it if you shared with us what you want to hear more from. And so we'll be back.
Right. Here it is.
Diversity, equity, inclusion, and leadership. That's the deal when you know what you're dealing with.